As Australia's deputy ambassador to China in the 1970s, John Lander helped forge Australia's recognition of the PRC amid the U.S. covert meetings between Kissinger and Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai as part of Nixon's secret deal.
Can you go into a little further detail of the thought process that was going on, or policy terms behind Australia's recognition of China at that time?
Senior people in the department felt particularly blindsided by the announcement that Henry Kissinger had been conducting secret visits to China, negotiating with Premier Zhou Enlai for the eventual normalisation of relations between China and the United States. So we suddenly realised that we were going to have to also move to recognition of the People's Republic of China. In July 1971, we produced a policy planning paper providing policy advice to the government that said that the alliance with the United States would mean less to us in the future than it had in the past, and that Australia should develop independent policies based on Australian national interest and the interests of our near neighbours. This was a reaction to the fact that we realised that we couldn't rely on the United States to protect Australia's interests. The United States policy actions internationally could in fact at times be quite inimical to Australia's interests. And of course today it's far more relevant and far more urgent than it was then.
As deputy ambassador to China in the 1970s, thus, Lander helped forge Australia to PRC ties amid Nixon's secret deals. His co-authored, suppressed 1971, policy paper warned of an unreliable U.S., now potentially blindsiding Australia on Taiwan. Today, it's eerily relevant. AUKUS risks turning Australia into a U.S. proxy in a Taiwan conflict Australia can't win.
The revelation that the United States was moving towards potential recognition of the People's Republic of China, plus the fact that Gough Whitlam, as leader of the opposition, had already declared that were he to win government, he would immediately recognise the People's Republic of China. And of course, he visited China as leader of the opposition in 1971, I think. And of course, he did win the election in November 1972, and we had spent all of that time in the lead up to the election preparing for the transition from recognition of the ROC to the recognition of the PRC. So I was also involved as a very junior officer at the time in documentation and the preparation of advice and so on regarding the negotiations for the joint communique on the recognition of the PRC. That led fairly quickly to the formulation that is now in the joint communique of recognition of the People's Republic of China, which acknowledged, that is, recognised and accepted the position of the government of the People's Republic of China that Taiwan is a province of China. The narrative these days that Taiwan is somehow separate from China and must be protected from any invasion by China is a false narrative.
Due to his involvement in formulating the joint communique, which upheld the PRC's claim that Taiwan was an integral part of China, former diplomat John Lander now views Australia's policy towards Taiwan as paradoxical and provocative.
The military activities by the People's Liberation Army and the People's Liberation Army Navy and Air Force around Taiwan, I see as essentially expressions of the determination of the People's Republic of China to prevent the alienation of Taiwan from China's sovereign territory. And it is interesting that most of the military activity around Taiwan in response to provocative activities by the United States and its allies, including Australia. And it is, I think, important to note that since Australia does not deny that Taiwan is part of China's sovereign territory, intrusions by Australian warships or Australian aircraft into Taiwan's waters or over Taiwan's airspace are in fact intrusions into the territory of China. And it could be argued quite reasonably, I think, that China has the right to defend itself and, if necessarily, forcibly repel such intrusions. We're very lucky that China, up till now, has chosen not to take that kind of action. So Australia's policy with regard to Taiwan's status is paradoxical, because on the one hand we say, yes, Taiwan is part of China's sovereign territory, and on the other hand we say, oh, we have the right to conduct freedom of navigation operations in China's sovereign territory.
Behind Australia's paradoxical foreign policy regarding China is a pattern of U.S. proxy war strategies Lander observed as first Australian ambassador to Iran in 1984 to 1988 during the Iran and Iraq War.
And it was evident to me then, I got into a bit of trouble with our intelligence boffins in Canberra for saying so, but it was evident to me then that the United States at that point was using Iraq as its proxy to confront the Islamic Republic of Iran and to try to weaken it, in fact, even to overthrow the government, which was the first government ever in the history of Iran to set up a democratic electoral system.
That US proxy strategy, how has that manifested itself in the current geopolitical circumstance, particularly as it may affect Australia?
And it's clear to me, although it's not clear to many, many people, that Israel is in fact the proxy of the United States in the conduct of the United States geopolitical strategy in the Middle East or West Asia. So the Israeli attacks on Iran, and of course its success in taking out quite a bit of the leadership of the IRGC, the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps, and the subsequent bombing by the United States of Iran's nuclear research facilities had really nothing to do with the non-existent nuclear weapons development program of Iran, because, as I said, it was non-existent. It was part of the strategy of attempting to disrupt Iran and, if possible, detach it from China's Belt and Road and to detach it from collaboration with China. The use of proxies is a time-worn strategy of the United States. Of course, we see the same thing in Ukraine. The United States made it very clear before Russia conducted its military intervention into eastern Ukraine. A month before, press briefing at the White House said that the United States, in concert with its European allies, would weaken Russia to the extent that it could exert no influence on the international stage.
Working in tandem, financial sanctions and export controls are embedded in a broader strategy that would undercut Putin's aspirations to project power and exert influence on the world stage.
So the pretense of assisting Ukraine to defend itself against the Russian invasion was maintained for at least the first year, and then more and more American spokespeople like Lindsey Graham and Nancy Pelosi and so on began explicitly describing Ukraine as fighting on behalf of the United States against Russia.
To stop the Russians, so if we don't have to fight them, they don't want any American troops, they just need weapons.
According to Lander, these proxy wars shield the U.S. from direct engagement, while forcing their adversaries to drain resources. While the U.S. proxies bear the brunt of conflict, as happened in Ukraine and would be the case for Australia in any military engagement with China over Taiwan.
And so that translates fairly quickly back to the whole question of China. And again, Elbridge Colby, one of the United States warmonger strategists, made it very clear in his book, The Strategy of Denial, that it was the intention of the United States to use Taiwan both as pretext and proxy to instigate a war involving China, again with the purpose of bogging down China in a protracted conflict which would inhibit its economic growth and impede its capacity to cooperate in economic development with other countries. And of course, the United States makes it perfectly clear that it expects Japan, the Philippines and Australia to come to the defence of Taiwan, so that Australia, Japan and the Philippines would be part of the network of proxies that would be used to embroil China in a war that would distract it from its policy of peaceful development, cooperation right across the global south.
While its proxy status is being established, Australia's social cohesion is increasingly under pressure as the identity politics of multiculturalism dominate Australian discourse. Veteran diplomat John Lander, once himself with the former Office of Multicultural Affairs, sees such undermining of multiculturalism as deliberately divisive.
For quite a considerable time after the end of the Second World War, with the arrival of immigrants from Western Europe, the policy was to maintain what Sir Robert Menzies called a homogeneous population in Australia, which even at that time was disingenuous because the Australian population was already not homogeneous, because it ignored the fact that we had First Nations peoples. You had an Aboriginal population already in Australia, which was hardly homogeneous with the white Australia that Menzies was promoting. And it really wasn't up until after Whitlam was elected that Australia began to move towards formally recognising the very existence of the Aboriginal population as legitimate citizens of the country. So by the time Bob Hawke was Prime Minister, and the national agenda for a multicultural Australia was formulated and published in 1989. When I happened to be working shortly after that, I was working in the Office of Multicultural Affairs, which Bob Hawke set up as an arm of the Prime Minister's Department. There were various chapters in the national agenda, the preface of which made it very clear that the purpose of the national agenda was to recognise the fact that Australia was already very multicultural. The purpose of the national agenda was to formalise and acknowledge the fact that Australia was a multicultural society, and to take a deliberate and structured approach to making the best use of the fact that we were multicultural, to get as much benefit from the diversity, linguistic, cultural, ethnic, religious, and so on. All this diversity in Australia could be turned to Australia's advantage, particularly economically.
Okay.
So I was appointed the director of what was known as the Economic and Commercial section of the Office of Multicultural Affairs, and my task was to put flesh on the bones of the proposition that linguistic, ethnic, cultural, religious diversity was an economic asset.
Following the divisive March for Australia rallies, anti-immigration sentiment in Australia increased, coupled with right-wing extremism, resulting in an attempted Australia Day 2026 mass casualty event in Perth targeting mostly Indigenous Australians and pro-diversity supporters.
Why is there resurfaced a hostility towards multiculturalism and an almost misrepresentation of it?
I think it's emerged, at least in part, as a function of creating this antipathy towards the rise of China. China has emerged as an alternative to the United States for so many countries, particularly the countries of Southeast Asia, who are our near neighbours. They are increasingly cooperating with and developing strategic partnerships, as they call them, with China. This is seen as reinforcing China's ability to dominate our region, and therefore that represents a threat to Australia. And so the antipathy towards the non-Caucasian population in Australia, I think, is a product of this fear of the yellow peril, as it used to be called.
In Australia's struggle for internal social cohesion, Lander sees potential U.S. war against China as driven by America's perception of China's rise as an economic threat to U.S. hegemony. In particular, China's harnessing of diversity to mobilize the global South.
The BRICS organisation has now 10 full members, so it extends beyond the original 5, who gave their names to the acronym BRICS. Right. The only country in our own region that is not a partner of BRICS is Australia, and I think that is significant because it is an indication of the extent to which Australia is deliberately isolating itself from the countries of its own region, in direct contradiction to the recommendation we made back in 1971, which was that we should act in our own interest and the interests of our near neighbours. The point you made about the reduction in the reliance on the United States dollar was characterised by President Trump himself as equivalent to losing World War III. So the United States sees China's role as the alternative guarantor of a world economic system distinct from the system set up by the United States as the principal threat to United States interests and even its survival, because increasingly the countries that are cooperating within the BRICS framework in their bilateral trade relationships, moving towards trade in each other's own currencies and reducing the reliance on the United States dollar as the currency of exchange. That hasn't reached crisis point yet, but the trend is in that direction. And it is that decline that I think the United States sees as really the principal long-term existential threat, because once the United States dollar ceases to be in demand by countries all around the globe, it will cease to have value, and that will then render the $37 trillion debt that the United States owes to a very large number of countries in the rest of the world unpayable. It will render the United States basically insolvent, which is why Trump said it will be like losing World War III. Right. The United States, of course, has described Australia as, I quote, the epicenter of the projection of United States power in the Indo-Pacific. So even if the United States were to decide to actively engage itself in a so-called kinetic war against China, it would be launched from and be conducted from Australia, which would inevitably make the facilities in Australia a target for China.
most Australians want our immigration policy radically reviewed and that of multiculturalism abolished. I believe we are in danger of being swamped by Asians.
I can do that too. He's too lazy to jerk off. He can only get a gook. He can't even get a regular girlfriend. It's so sad. He's got to get a gook.
Pauline Hanson famously said that Australia was in danger of being swamped by Asians. 2 decades later, it was the same xenophobic rhetoric with a new target: Muslims.
Now we are in danger of being swamped by Muslims.
Yes, I can see that in the China threat rhetoric that has developed. But what about also that same ethnocentrism that's currently being directed against the immigration from Middle East countries, for example?
Well, it's current, but it also goes back a long way. I mean, the xenophobia against Islamic peoples, particularly the Islamic peoples of the Middle East, really stems from 9/11, the famous attack on the Twin Towers in New York, which of course stemmed from United States activities in the Middle East.
This crusade, this war on terrorism, is going to take a while.
The attack on the Twin Towers didn't come out of nowhere. It was an attempt to retaliate against the United States, and particularly the United States invasion of Iraq and its shock and awe campaign, which was the precursor to Israel's campaign in Gaza. Israel is in fact emulating its mentor in conducting this campaign of extermination, because the shock and awe campaign in Iraq was specifically designed to destroy a civilian infrastructure and create conditions inimical to the survival of human life. It wasn't just a war against the armed forces of Iraq.
The time is overdue to develop a new screening test for the threats we face today.
So, of course, all of these things created a flood of refugees from the Middle East. And of course, resulted in official pronouncements that the greatest threat worldwide to peace was, in fact, Islamic terrorism. And there was a very easy slide down the slippery slope to simply identifying anybody who was Islamic or who looked like an Islamic person from the Middle East to identify them as potential terrorists.
Refugees have been demonised so successfully, especially since 9/11 as well, and particularly Muslims, of course.
Directly to the front, 2 guys moving right to left, behind the wall!
You try to look back at your career as try and be proud of it, but then you've got all these incidents. You see yourself as part of the bad guys.
So the Islamophobia in Australia went on for quite a long time as the principal driver of the xenophobia. And that continues to this day, of course. It doesn't get much publicity, but anti-Islamic incidents still occur quite frequently.
In your opinion, were war crimes committed in Afghanistan by Australia's Special Forces?
Yes, there were. You can't shoot unarmed people and not call that murder.
You don't like the flag? Off!
Mayhem in Melbourne. Rival sides of the political divide on the rampage. What's brought it to this boiling point? Migration.
No, it's not racist at all. It's just about mass immigration and people coming over and not assimilating with the Aussie way of life.
So you're against Muslim migration?
I am Islamophobic.
Yeah, definitely been called a terrorist, as well as being called the N-word.
Also marching Australia's neo-Nazis, stoking fear, recruiting and fighting.
Shortly following Australian Prime Minister Albanese's declaration of support for a Palestinian state, in August 2025, ASIO Director General Mike Burgess publicly stated in a joint press conference with Albanese that Iran's IRGC directed a synagogue attack via a layer cake of cutouts proxies.
Today I can also announce that we have established AFP Special Operation Avalite for anti-Semitism. This is in response to the attack last Friday morning that is now the third arson attack after the attack on Josh Burns' electorate office and the Sydney Woollahra car incident.
As a member of the Joint Counter-Terrorism Team, ASIO will be assisting police with their investigations and assisting the Australian Federal Police with their special operation. We're also conducting our own inquiries and investigations to check to ensure that there is no ongoing threat or individuals with similar capabilities to the attack we've just seen in Melbourne.
Sky News Australia's Shari Markson reported that Israeli intelligence, Mossad, had evidently provided key intelligence that assisted SIO's investigation.
Israeli intelligence helped Australia during its investigation into how Iran orchestrated the terror attacks on our soil.
A short time ago, we informed the Iranian ambassador to Australia that he would be expelled. We have suspended operations at our embassy in Tehran.
The subsequent termination of diplomatic relations between Australia and Iran by the Albanese government ended 40 years of intercultural diplomacy that had been established by John Lander during his time in the mid-1980s as Australia's first ambassador to the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Now that Albanese announced the recognition of Palestine as a nation, and Netanyahu's famous condemnation, therefore, of Albanese, what effect is this likely to have on, one, geopolitically reaction to Israel's actions in Gaza, but two, specifically, multicultural social policy regarding such as anti-Semitism and Gillian Siegel's proposal that, for example, the definition of anti-Semitism include the infamous equation between
anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. Yeah. The pro-Palestine movement in Australia has gained a lot of strength, and I think it is very significant that a very large number of Jewish people in Australia support pro-Palestine movement. So the pro-Palestine movement is not anti-Semitic by definition at all. The most recent demonstrations in support of Palestine on Sydney Harbour Bridge and of course here in Melbourne last weekend, vast numbers of people came out. The crowd included not just Jewish people, not just Islamic Australians, but people from all ethnic, religious and cultural groups. It was in fact a march which, apart from anything else, displayed Australia's multicultural character. You know, if the white supremacists, with their March for Australia and all the rest of it, have never enunciated any concept of what they're trying to achieve beyond the driving out, or at least the suppression, of every other culture apart from Anglo-Celtic culture. Well, I think it should be called Anglo-American culture, really. The moment it becomes illegal to criticise Zionism because it's deemed to be anti-Semitic.
They've already started to make that equation, at least in popular discourse, social media discourse, looking for it. most anything seems to be labelled anti-Semitism that is even remotely a criticism of Israel.
Yes. You only have to hint distaste for Israel and you're anti-Semitic. It's the only country in the world that has succeeded in conflating a criticism of the state with a criticism of the religion. The extent to which Australia is turning into an oppressive regime is quite frightening.
On February 28, 2026, the U.S. attacked the Islamic Republic of Iran. Their targets knowingly included a girls' school. U.S. Department of War Secretary Pete Hegseth sought religious justification, while U.S. President Trump evoked genocidal rhetoric on his Truth Social platform. Immediately following the U.S. attack, Australian Prime Minister Albanese pledged support for the U.S., claiming the threat of Iran having nuclear weapons, which Lander knew to be false and misleading.
But all this developments in the Middle East at the moment, I mean, this totally unwarranted attack on Iran by Israel and the United States. But all of this, of course, the whole American attitudes and hostility towards Iran is, I think, more connected with America's determination to do damage to China than it is, or at least as much as anything to do with exercising Israel's hegemony in the Middle East. Because disrupting Iran disrupts China's energy supplies. And if that happens, and China finds itself at war with the United States, then Australia will obviously be at war with China, because the United States will obviously mount a kind of a rearguard action against China in the East to reduce China's capacity to support any effort over in West Asia. And if we're officially at war with China, then everything gets disrupted and possibly quite a lot gets bombed.